Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Old Hunt, where we are still celebrating 10 years of Bloodborne. Last time, we went through the Nightmare Lecture Building. The lecture building that's adrift in the Nightmare seems to have once been part of Byrgenwerth. It's sort of strange exactly what that space is, especially because now it's adrift in the Nightmare, but that's where we went. And after having done that, we opened a set of double doors, very fancy looking, and walked out into the Nightmare Frontier. Couldn't get back. We talked about some of the strange connections possibly between nightmares. Is there more than one nightmare? Is there only one nightmare? Is this all a dream? Very strange, confusing questions that come from traversing the dream spaces in Bloodborne. However, in running around all those places, we also acquired a bunch of different items, some of which are very important to the game lore, and some of which, we'll be wanting to play around with a bit on our character build. So I wanted to start off this episode, before we get back to exploring the Nightmare Frontier, I wanted to take a look at some of these items that we found, and we're going to look at two items somewhat related here. You can see even visually, let me bring up the bigger pictures here, even visually they're sort of similar, very slimy. They've got the sort of bluish-white color scheme happening here, and they're like long, sort of squid-like type creatures, those sorts of things. So what's going on here? And this also, I think, goes to the fact that these items are so similar, they're found in slightly different places, right? This particular thing here, the empty phantasm shell, as it's officially translated, is found in Byrgenwerth itself, right? The Byrgenwerth that we run through the Forbidden Woods, and finally we arrive and, we run past the hunter who's defending the stairs and climb up that ladder, and eventually we get to this, I think it's in a treasure chest, and we get this empty phantasm shell. And so it's in, Byrgenwerth that's attached to the rest of the Forbidden Woods in Yharnam. And then there's this, the Augur of Ebriatus, which I forgot was in the Nightmare Lecture Building. We found it in the last episode. It's in a treasure chest there. So, in a sense, they come from the same place, but in a sense, they come from two completely different places. One's in a nightmare, the other's in maybe the real world. Maybe it's another form of a nightmare that's just more elaborate. I don't know. But anyway, we are going to take a look at these two items, similarly themed as they are. I think it's an interesting sort of mirroring, now that I've got them up on screen, between the mirroring, the similar nature of these things and the similar nature of the place where we find them, even though they're separated in space and they're separated in function. So that's interesting. Bear that in mind, I guess, as I go through these descriptions. Okay, so I mentioned the title of this one before. This is the Empty Phantasm Shell. That is, for the most part, pretty straightforward, right? Nuke gata, kata means shell. It's being read as gata in continuation from nuke. Nuke comes from nukeru, which means it's been shed, maybe you could say. There was something in here and it left it. So now it is empty, right? That's where the empty is coming from, in the empty shell. And I think empty shell is a pretty good idea for a nuke gata. And we have no in the middle between the two sort of key terms, which means of. So this is the empty shell of a, and then literally, if you look at this word up in the dictionary, seire, you'll get the word spirit. However, the official translators have settled on something different, and we'll see why when we get, or at least, I don't know if we'll see entirely why, but we'll get, I think, a very good idea why when we go through the description. So let's do that now. Empty shell of a molluscal being known to be forerunners of great ones. And just in that first line, there's a number of assumptions that I have to make, right? Great ones could be singular or plural. I think probably because this is speaking generally about the nature of these molluscal life forms, right? It's pretty safe to say that generally it's speaking about great ones, and therefore the plural makes sense. The Nantai Seibutsu, the molluscal being, it's being treated generally when it comes to the overall statement, right? These molluscal beings are known as forerunners of great ones, but they're this specific shell is it's this one item, right? This is an empty phantasm shell singular. So it makes sense that we would think of the molluscal being as singular because this is just a cast-off shell, right? So we have the empty shell of a molluscal being. Also, wrapped up in that, We know that molluscal beings are known to be, I keep saying forerunners, and that's a little bit because it's the word that's in my head, of great ones. Sakibure is, I think actually this is the thing. Yeah, indeed. This is exactly what is translated as augur in the title of this next item that I'm going to get to, the augur of Briatus, right? So the idea, and I think I've talked about this before, right? Very literally, it's for touch, right? Because the first kanji means like in advance or before, and the second kanji, which is part of the word fureru, is touch, right? So it is a for touch, right? But it's also actually just a word that means something that like precedes, like an omen or an augur or a forerunner. So we have these molluscal beings, and I think the official translation goes with invertebrates. And I keep saying molluscal because that's a little bit literal. I think if you look up Nantai Seibutsu, or maybe it's just Nantai, I think it's the whole thing, Nantai Seibutsu, you look that up in a dictionary, you'll get the idea of a mollusk, which includes invertebrates, but also is a bit wider. I think invertebrates is a pretty solid idea for what sort of creature we're talking about here. I think the only reason you would make this very fine distinction is when you're getting at the idea of what the literal dictionary definition is. I just think molluscal being sounds a little bit weird and awkward. Not quite as awkward as invertebrate. And since you've got an image to like ground your mind in what sort of creature we're talking about here, I think that helps. So anyway, we have these beings which are known to be associated with preceding, act as augurs or omens for great ones, and this is the empty shell of one of those beings. Okay, second line. Various types of these molluscal beings exist, and the Healing Church calls them as a whole, spirits, right? Literally, it's that term coming back. This is what I said we'd get to when I talked about the title thing here. So this is why I think spirit isn't a great translation, because they're just molluscal beings, right? And there are various types of these molluscal or invertebrate beings, right? It's not just one type of invertebrate. There are various types of them, and they get this umbrella term of being called spirits, literally, or phantasms in the official translation. And the reason I don't like spirits is because, like I said, they're actually these creatures. So if you call them spirits, it sounds like the Healing Church is dealing with these completely disembodied figures, and I think the meaning of the word spirit clashes a little bit more heavily with being associated with these sorts of living creatures as opposed to phantasm. Because phantasm, yeah, it can mean spirit, but it's also not as common a word, and it can sort of more readily, I think, take on this idea of being associated with invertebrate beings. So just going forward, I'm going to be using the official translation of phantasm because I think it makes sense and sounds better. So I'm going to stick to that policy. And let's move on so that we move down to the final set of lines here after that initial section. All right, so particularly empty shells which still have slipperiness, which still have slime, right, with slime left over. I'm not entirely sure the best way to phrase that literally, but the idea is there's particularly these shells which still have some amount of slime remaining in them. Also, have remaining in them power of holy mystery, right? Arcane power. So I think the official translation is like still harbor arcane power, which just sounds much better than what I just said. The idea, I think, is somewhat straightforwardly, right? The idea is that these creatures themselves, and this might be getting at why they're sort of phantasmal. They're not entirely of this world, right? They have the idea of them as a living organism that we can see and interact with, but they're associated with the great ones, and their slime is associated with arcane power. So the beings themselves are probably arcane beings, right? And this is why they're not just being classified purely as, ordinary animals. They're augurs, they're omens, right? They're these special phantasm type beings, right? Anyway, by rubbing this, you can cloak a weapon in power of holy mystery. Again, right? Arcane power. So very straightforwardly, that is telling you how the mechanic works. So do I have a weapon that I haven't converted? Maybe it'll work with a rifle spear. Let's find out. I do have a gem that is boosting the rifle spear's arcane attack, but I don't know if that's going to invalidate the use of the empty phantasm shell. This thing right here. Can't use it. Okay, that's what I was afraid of. What weapon? Okay, the threaded cane. I haven't used that in ages. So we'll use the threaded cane here, and we can come all the way back down to the empty phantasm shell, and now I can actually use it. And look at this, it's glowing. It's got that slime, right? I think the idea is you rub some of that slime that remains in the shell, and you transfer the arcane power that is still resident in the shell and the slime onto the weapon. And this is sort of like fire paper and bolt paper. Oh, sorry. I did not mean to do that. Like I said, I don't like attacking the doll. I should have moved further away. But anyway, that's sort of how this works, right? It's the arcane, and it's an interesting thing, right? Fire paper and bolt paper, they're consumables, they run out. Empty phantasm shell is one of those consumables that's not a consumable. You can just constantly use it, right? Whenever this buff wears off, I could just use the empty phantasm shell again and put it right back on. So in that sense, it's a little bit more useful. And you're getting at the nature of, you know, borrowing power from another living being as opposed to the more mechanical recreation of the sandpaper-like stuff that you get with fire paper and bolt paper. So yeah, it sort of adds a little bit of arcane damage to every one of your attacks. Okay, so that's mechanically how the empty phantasm shell works. And I think there are some very interesting implications for how these creatures are associated with Great Ones and arcane power, and you can sort of borrow their strength, and it's just an interesting concept. And we're going to see it elaborated on, and this is why I wanted to have these two things together. We're going to see it elaborated on when we come over here to the Augur of Ebrietas. So once again, I've just given the title of the item again, right? Augur of Ebrietas. Literally, what was I saying? Foretouch, right? Very, very literally, foretouch of Ebrietas, right? It's the idea of this is something that you would see or associate just before you encounter Ebrietas. You would see this thing, right? It's an omen that Ebrietas is on the horizon. If Ebrietas, was the sun or something like that, but it's not. So she's not. Anyway, let's get to the description here. Oh, and right out the gate, we have the classic ambiguity of Mieru Mamieru. I'm glad I was just talking about that in the last episode. Okay, so remnant of holy mystery that Byrgenwerth once either saw or had audience with. It's unclear which one of those two meanings is actually going on. Now, personally, my preferred interpretation is that this is a remnant of the arcane power, the holy mystery, that Byrgenwerth encountered. I think they encountered this strange holy mystery, and this is what's left of it. That's my interpretation. But it doesn't have to be that, because the verb is using a kanji that could be read in one of two different ways and therefore lead to one of two different meanings. So it could have just been, once witnessed by Byrgenwerth. Could be once witnessed at Byrgenwerth too, I suppose. But I think by Byrgenwerth is a little bit more interesting as well, right? Especially because Byrgenwerth is being identified with the sort of topic or subject marker ga, as opposed to the locational marker, one of the locational markers like ni or de. So it doesn't necessarily have to be at Byrgenwerth that this witnessing or encountering happened at, right? It could be that Byrgenwerth itself, right? There might have been this expedition from Byrgenwerth, right? Maybe if we take our interpretation from the Graveguard set forward, maybe we have Master Willem and possibly even Carol and the two apprentices, right? Doris and the password gatekeeper, right? The two servants. Maybe this is the encounter that Willem and his servants found in the old labyrinth that caused the two to go insane and sort of led to other weird things happening. It seems to have been a momentous event, right? There seems to be this momentous event in Byrgenwerth's past. And also we start to see people starting to betray and leave Byrgenwerth, right? They're betraying Master Willem, and they're like going down this line that everyone's sort of unsatisfied. Well, if Master Willem knew about it, he would be dissatisfied with how they've only kept the outward trappings of Byrgenwerth and his student uniforms in their clothes. Something seems to have happened there. And again, the timeline exactly with what's going on with Byrgenwerth is unclear. And this item, I'm going to say, this item doesn't help us with clarity in terms of the timeline. It's very confusing. But I think that first line, my preferred interpretation, which again, I don't have anything to definitively say this is what the correct interpretation is. This is just how I prefer to interpret it, is that you have this group from Byrgenwerth, and they encountered Holy Mystery, the Eldritch Truth, right? I think this is essentially a code word, and this is one of the reasons why I also, personally, am not a huge fan of saying that should always, like, arcane is always arcane, and it's this larger diffuse force, because I think this is an instance where we're meant to understand arcane as sort of being a stand-in for the Great Ones, right? What was going on with the empty phantasm shell, right? Arguably, again, all of this is arguable, all this is debatable. Welcome to Bloodborne! But arguably, what's happening with the empty phantasm shell is we're seeing the Great Ones have a huge amount of arcane power, and the beings that surround them, that are, therefore act as portents of them, also harbor an unusual amount of arcane power, to the effect that the slime that lingers in the abandoned shells still have arcane power that we can coat our weapons in. Right? That very interpretive. That's how I'd like to take it. You can take it some other way. That's fine. Anyway, and so I think, they go down, and this thing here, which, there's a reason there's visual similarity here. We're going to see it's a phantasm, is a remnant of the encounter that the Byrgenwerth group had with Ebrietas, the Great One, who is named in the item name of this, in the name of this item. Whew. Okay, that's the first line. We're keeping it together. We're keeping it together. We're going to go to the central section here. So these molluscal beings, which are known as Augurs of the Great Ones, phantasms, by using those phantasms as a medium, this is a thing that summons a portion of the abandoned Great One, Ebrietas. Or, doesn't have to be the abandoned Great One, could be an abandoned Great One. There could be many, right? This is Japanese, right? So there's no articles to let us know. I think the abandoned Great One makes sense because it sort of seems like the title for Ebrietas, right? So this is a thing that summons a portion of the abandoned Great One, Ebrietas, using phantasms, or I think a phantasm. I think the one in the picture right there, right? I think this is a phantasm. That's a picture of it. We're using it as a medium to summon forth that portion of Ebrietas. And I think that's another hint that holy encounter, right? I was talking about how the holy mystery, the arcane, I think is acting as sort of a stand-in for the idea of a Great One. I think it's specifically the Great One, Ebrietas, that the group from Byrgenwerth once ran into, and they got out of that encounter, right? Probably before they met Ebrietas, they encountered a bunch of phantasms, and then after they met Ebrietas, right, this was one of the phantasms that one of them grabbed that was associated with Ebrietas, and now they can use it as a medium to summon a portion of Ebrietas wherever they are. And boy, isn't that interesting. Now again, a lot of this is very interpretive, right? You talk to some other lore people, I'm sure they'll give you a different understanding of how this works. This is just my take on it, sort of based off of my own reading, right? I have a thing that I say in Translation Born: interpretation is inevitable, right? There are certain things that when you look at a sentence, you just have to make certain decisions when you're interpreting meaning. And this is one of those ways in which sometimes you can see, right? After you've made your decision, it's like one of those pictures that could be one thing and then another. Sometimes you can see when you're doing a translation, like, oh, there's an alternative possibility, could also be understood this way. Usually you've got some sort of context, some sort of grounding, some sort of thing that lets you say, oh, well, okay, I understand that now, and you can just go off of that understanding. But this is Bloodborne, it's all very vague and hazy, so you just sort of have to chart your own path. And this is my playthrough, and I'm glad that you're joining me, but this is the interpretation that I'm going to give you. Anyway, I've harped on that point probably for much too long. Let's continue to the final section here. Okay. This chance encounter became the beginning of the investigation in search of the cosmos in the underground ruins. Okay, so the underground ruins, which are the Chalice Dungeons, which are the Tomb of the Gods, seems to be where this encounter took place, right? Seems like they went down into the Tomb of the Gods, and they had a chance encounter with the Eldritch Truth that was Ebrietas, and it rocked them to their cores, sent Willem's servants insane, and Willem maybe grabbed one of these phantasms, came back, and was like, you guys won't believe what just happened down there. I've seen the truth. There are these beings out there that are as gods, right? And they are like in tune with the cosmos. And we need to go down there into the underground ruins in order to search out outer space, right? The cosmos, I've been saying, literally the Japanese is just the term for outer space, right? So I think cosmos is just objectively a better translation choice in this case because outer space is nonsensical. And as much as this is supposed to sound a little bit nonsensical, why are they going down into the underground ruins to search for outer space, right? I think you're supposed to be confronted by that idea a little bit. I think the clash is too great. I think Cosmos just works better. You still get a little bit of that clash, but it also makes a little bit more sense, and it just works better that way. And here's where we get back to remember what I said, the timeline gets a little bit fuzzy here. The final line here, that, right, and we're referencing back, which I think is all of this search for the cosmos in the underground labyrinth, connects to the later Holy Song Troupe, in quotation marks, Japanese quotation marks. And so the Holy Song Troupe is officially translated as the choir. And we'll eventually learn the choir is like a healing church faction. So this search for truth in the underground labyrinth is connected to the later, like much later organization, the choir. So what exactly is going on here? When exactly is all this taking place? It's a little bit tough to say. I think it's talking about in the long run, right? It's describing sort of the origin of the quest for the cosmos that started at Byrgenwerth and that chance encounter. And that same sort of spirit, that same line of inquiry would eventually get picked up by the choir at a future point in time. That much I think is relatively safe to say, but I don't know. Anyway, I've spent quite a deal of time going over that, and I've also messed up my weapon setup here. So we want to get the rifle spear back, and I'm going to have officially switch out the torch. Wait a minute. Oh, we can't. Right, it's not a. I'm thinking of the Augur of Breaches as a weapon because, as you'll see, you can equip it, but you have to use it from here. And when you have it equipped from here, you couldn't really see that. You could see the very cool Cosmos thing that happened. There you go. You summon a portion of Ebrietas. You summon some tentacles through, like, the space, right? You can see why they would call it an inquiry into the cosmos. Also, if you'll look at my Quicksilver bullets, you'll note that as I was using that, they've been going down, right? I think I was at 17 when I started doing those attacks, and now I'm at 14. And if you watch, like now, I'll do it actively. Now I'm at 13. So every one of these uses of the Augur of Ebrietas is costing one of my Quicksilver bullets. And as I've said before, I think the active ingredient in Quicksilver bullets is blood, and therefore the arcane sort of hunter tool that is the Augur of Ebrietas is another one of the consumables that never goes away, right? I think that is essentially being powered by our blood. Now, again, another, bit of out there theorizing, interpreting of my own, so, take for that what you will. All right, I just want to check, okay, these resources are decent, right? I feel comfortable about that level of resources. So I'm going to try and save up for a level. It's a little bit risky, leaving the dream without spending all your blood echoes, but I'm going to give it a shot. And we're going to head to the Nightmare Frontier. Okay, here we are. Let me get back to the actual weapon I still want to play with. And make sure it's... There we go. We got to get it in the right mode so that we've got our gigantic blast at the ready. We've got our arcane stake driver. I love blasting through the defenses of these things. Wandering Madnesses, I think they're called. It's just fun. So here we are. This is the Nightmare Frontier. And I was talking before about a sort of parallel with the Forbidden Woods. Well, look around. Look at these places. You can almost see that sort of looks like maybe a windmill. I don't think it's actually a windmill. I think it's just a like rock formation. But these giant graves that are in a state of disarray, right? There are giant graves that look just like them in the Forbidden Woods. Also, just think of in terms of positioning, right? So we got here by going through a lecture building that's sort of associated with Byrgenwerth, and we stepped through it into this sort of wilderness-type area that is noticeably less, like, structured and ordered and, like, in terms of, it looks less, I don't know, for lack of a better term, civilized, right, than the College of Byrgenwerth. And you contrast that with the way that you leave the built-up city of Yharnam, and you have this sort of interstitial space that is the Forbidden Woods. And I think, I haven't really talked about it, but I do think that the Forbidden Woods serves that sort of role, right? You get these very distinct areas. You get the urban center of Yharnam. You get the, very carefully kept area of Byrgenwerth. I mean, granted, it's a ruin now, essentially, but it's still, you can see it was carefully maintained and kept, and you have these, like, pristine lines of, like, geometry in the construction of the building. And in the middle, you have this sprawling mass of the Forbidden Woods. And it's a little bit of a wasteland, literally, in the sense that, it's this sort of in-between region where wildness is flourishing. And it ultimately connects to Byrgenwerth. And so we have this thing here, which is starting out with something of a connection to Byrgenwerth. And what are we coming out into? We're coming out into sort of this blasted landscape with these, like, strange rock formations and these graves, right? It's sort of another wasteland. And I mean, I was describing the Forbidden Woods as a wasteland in terms of, like, unique items earlier, so I just don't want to, I want to make sure there's no confusion. I've essentially given up on that point, because I think the Forbidden Woods actually are, like, decent in terms of continuing to provide you new items as you continue to play through the game. But I do think the, like, actual physical role, like the visual differentiation that you get from these sort of in-between spaces is notable. All right, now I know we can sneak up on this thing, and I want to see just how good my super powerful attack is. I also know it's very short range, so we're going to give it a try from here. All right. Of course, he didn't go flying, because that could have set up a backstab. I say he, I don't know. Look at this thing. How do you make sense of this? I have no idea. And finally, also, we're going to get some more elemental gems. Right here, we've got a fire gem already. That's going to make things nice for, converting certain weapons and things. Now, they're all waning, so I don't think I can use them on this particular version of the stake driver, but still. Eventually, when we've got our saw spear, that'll be useful for that. And maybe we'll get some other shapes of gems as well. I don't remember. I remember this place sort of being a great way to gain additional runes and power-ups and things. But I'm not so sure about it, like the nature of those runes and power-ups. All right, now we have, like, the bigger version. Oh, I forgot this happens. Hey, come running at me. Oh, it jumped. Right. Okay, it's got the big claws. Wow. Wow, those things reach. I've been talking too long. I forgot the basic rule of Bloodborne, which is always dodge forward or to the side. Dodging backward basically only gets you in more trouble. I had this whole thing where I talked about how it's, you're dead. I had this whole thing where I basically talked about how it's like this cool way of mechanizing the idea that you need to confront your fears. And, oh well. Alright, now what happened? Did I just not get the, drop? Or am I confused about where I am? I could well be confused about where I am. Okay. Alright. Dang it, stop hitting me. I'll let my greed live for another day. Okay, good. That's the jump attack. Alright. Whoa! Seriously? Did I just one-shot it? R1. Holy smokes. These things must be weak to arcane. Wow. Okay. Now, I definitely got the one to run away from me. And am I just directionally challenged? I might just be directionally challenged. Okay, good. I was worried I lost this drop, because these drops in particular are important, right? Twin bloodstone shards and regular bloodstone shards even on those sorts of creatures. They're very important. Important enough, in fact. Oh, there we go. There's a lightning gem for me. So finally, if I wanted to, I could convert a weapon to lightning damage. Not entirely sure I'm going to do that just yet. We've got a bit more exploration to do. But I think it's worth resetting the game to get back that one particular Wandering Madness. I'll be with you again shortly. Alright, we're back. And I can already hear it running away from me. But it's not going to get far. Aha! There we go. Another one-shot. See, there's just the regular bloodstone shards. So this is going to enable us to, you know, further upgrade the weapons that, you know, may not currently be up to snuff. We're going to get them there. So look at how they tease you with these items all over the place. All these hinted connections and things. Oh, that's interesting. An invisible torch burns in its hand. Anyway, I think we've got some hunter enemies to encounter up here. So I'm going to focus on them. I think the cerebral portion of this episode is truly over. Also, look at this. Right, we've got the sort of melting weird status even on these larger gravestones. All right, here's one. There's another that's going to show up. Are you going to run at me? Aw, that would have been so fun. Come on, come on, come on. Close the gap. Aw. All right. How much am I going to let my obsession with this attack rule me? Worth it. Totally worth it. Okay. All right, now get hit by my super... Oops, hold on. I got to transform it to get the fastest version. All right. Yeah, you're scary. Hold on. Oh, no. Oh, no. I shouldn't be fighting two hunter enemies. What am I doing? How about the Augur of Abretus? There we go. How about you? How do you feel about the Augur of Abretus? Oops. I stepped forward. Just... Uh-oh. Talk about stepping forward too... I'm alive! I'm alive! Did he just fall to his death? Incredible. Oh, I was resigned to my death. This is amazing. Oh, I even think I know where I am. All right, I'm already poisoned, so I'm not going to care about that. Okay, maybe the untransformed version. Yeah, that's going to be better at hitting these enemies. Yep, hello. I see your poison cloud. I'm going to stay far away from it. Thank you very much. These things don't seem quite as weak to the arcane attacks. That's interesting. Okay. Okay. Well, this is not exactly the sequence that I was going to use for this episode. However, it works. The other thing that works about it, I mean, I said the cerebral portion of this episode was over. However, I do think it's important to note that... did I go? I think I'm going the wrong way. One of these ways leads out, and one of these ways leads further in, and I want to start by going further in. Gravestones on the ground are very good at, like, interrupting my footing, so... There we are. Oops, I healed a little early. That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, keep coming, buddy. I'm glad you missed. Okay. Yep, you're very scary. Okay. So long. Anyway, all this poison, right? This is another parallel with the Forbidden Woods, right? Because... Boy, I can't tell which way is which. Okay, I think this is the way that is not out, which is the way that I want to go first. So that's good. However, I am recalling that there are enemies up above at the moment that will throw rocks at me. So maybe I don't want to come this way just yet. Maybe I want to save this for a little bit later. Okay. Okay, I'm getting my bearings. Sorry, everybody. This episode took a real unexpected turn when I fell off that cliff and lived. I thought I was dead for sure. Anyway. Yeah, the poison, as I was saying, another tie to the Forbidden Woods, another tie to these wastelands, these poison wastes, right? And this is sort of a more classic implementation of the FromSoft idea of a poison swamp, right? There's poison in the Forbidden Woods, and the whole region of the woods is treacherous, but I don't think you're ever actively traversing, like, water that is impeding your movement that is also poisoning you. And, like, FromSoft games are pretty famous at this point for featuring exactly this sort of setup, where you've got these swamps that impede your movement, that are filled with poison, that have these enemies that are ambushing you all the time. Look at these rocks that are getting hurled in my direction. Right, those things will do crazy damage and probably kill me. So I want to not get hit by those. In fact, because of them, I'm just going to, like, rush over this way. Because this is the way that I can come that will allow me to eventually, depending on where I stand, work my way out of here. I'm glad I went that way first, because that rock, and that rock, would really have hurt me quite a lot. But if I come back this way, there we are. Feeling much better about this now. Look at this, working my way out of the situation that I was in. Okay, having come up here, I think if you're playing online, there's a bell ringer up here. That's like the purpose of this particular little hideaway. I just wanted to make sure there were no items that I was going to miss up here. And now let's see if I can draw one of these enemies close to me. This is a difficult thing to see in the actual version of the game. But if you look, you can see messengers in there. Maybe I'll, like, pause that, get an image, and make something out of it. But those enemies actually contain messengers inside of them. And when you kill them, I don't know if this got shown off to good effect or not. But when you defeat them, oops, they will drop. There we go. Let's see if they'll drop anything. All right, they're going to drop cold blood items. I don't know how related or not those facts are, right? I mean, most enemies don't drop cold blood items. Cold blood items tend to be concentrated in, like, specific corpse locations, as opposed to, you know, you get regular blood echoes, quote-unquote soft blood echoes. Oh, this guy's here. Hello. I see you've got your threaded cane. This weapon's faster. How do you like that? Just when I stop shooting. Ah, nice knife. Now you have the advantage. Ah, but now I have the advantage. Nope, gotta dodge forward. Or around some of these rocks. These rocks make the footing very, different. Wait, we hit each other at the same time. That was a tie. Ha! Yes! Run into my attack! I'm still not taking my own advice. There we go. There's me taking my own advice. Uh-oh. Yes! Ha-ha! I emerged victorious! What a shambles. But I think that's both of the hunters. I think one of them fell to their deaths, and the other one just engaged in combat with me to their doom. But anyway, as I was saying, I think most of the ways that you get those sort of quote-unquote hard cold blood items that contain blood echoes, but that you can sort of use from a menu, as opposed to the soft blood echoes that you acquire slowly by playing the game and defeating enemies, come from, like, specific drops on corpses. This weird, like, invertebrate enemy here, which has messengers inside of it, when you defeat it, drops cold blood items, in addition to giving you blood echoes. So, as far as I know, that's unique to that enemy, and I wonder at the connection there. I wonder if there's some relation, some amount of, like, working processing of cold blood, of maybe they're eating the messengers. The messengers don't seem to be being consumed. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. It's difficult to say. But the tie to the dream and the manipulation of cold blood, it sort of seems suggestive. But again, I don't know. Interesting to consider. Okay, hello. You, I remember to dodge fast, and I do crazy damage to you. That's right. Good, I need those blood vials. I've been chewing through them like crazy. All right. Okay, well, we've finally gotten to a point of, like, relative calm. And I think if I come over here, we will... Oh, hello there. I will want to defeat this enemy. Get their item they can give me. Look at that. One shot. Love this, like, arcane power. It's way more effective than I'm used to when it actually can connect in this particular space. Anyway, I'm going to... I think we've reached this moment of relative calm, so I'm going to take that as a good point to call the episode, call an end to my hunt for the evening. Thank you all very much for joining me. I hope this was an interesting one. I know things were sort of heady at the beginning, but hopefully we got enough craziness packed into the last, I don't know, 15 to 20 minutes that it was worthwhile. It's been a lot of fun for me to record, and I hope you'll join me for the next one. And in the meantime, I wish all of you good hunting. I said good hunting. Goodbye, everybody.